Welcome to Around the Empire. I'm your host, Joanne, and today, June 20th, 2018, I'm talking to political analyst and progressive independent Garland Nixon about the investigations and intelligence operations concerning the 2016 election. We also talk about the recently published Inspector General report on the Clinton email mid-year exam investigation. Garland is the co-host of a daily radio show, Fault Lines, and he's also the host of the weekly radio show, News Views with Garland Nixon. He also has a background in law enforcement and investigations. And here is that interview. Hello, Garland. Welcome to Around the Empire.
Hi, Joanne. Thanks for having me on.
So, Garland, we've learned some new things about the election investigations because the Inspector General Horowitz released the long-awaited IG report last week. And to be clear, just for our listeners, there are 3 different investigations being discussed, though there are actually more than 3. But the relevant ones for this discussion are the Clinton email investigation, also codenamed mid-year exam, the Trump-Russia counterintelligence investigation, and the Muller special counsel investigation. So there are 3 different things. We'll generally, you'll be able to tell which one we're talking about. Sure. So Garland, I listened to your morning radio show yesterday and today and found the discussions, really interesting about these topics. And your analysis and speculation it's particularly interesting to me because you're in neither camp. You're not in the Trump camp, nor are you in the Clinton camp. And even more so because you've had an entire career in law enforcement and particularly in investigations, which I didn't know until just, yesterday. So, and at this point.
And add this, additionally, I'm on the National Board of Directors for the American Civil Liberties Union.
Right. So I think that makes in my opinion, and, I'm a little biased because I'm also a Russiagate skeptic and our politics are very similar. But I think it makes your view, it lends it a lot of credibility. And at this point, this has all become a vast subject with various rabbit holes. So let's try to focus on a couple of things if we can. But, if this is a discussion, so if it goes in other places, then we should let it.
Yeah, as they say in investigations, we'll go where the evidence takes us.
Yes, exactly.
That's what we'll do.
Right. So one comment that you made yesterday, I believe it was, really piqued my interest. And you said, if I quote you, you said you were talking about you're reading a book on the Phoenix program, the Vietnam War, right? Mm-hmm. And you said that one of the things that happens when you read various books about CIA operations or intelligence operations over the years, it gives you a clearer, broad picture of the intelligence community. And that's why I said, I'm convinced now. I'm convinced that there was an extensive intelligence operation prior to the 2016 election. Its intent and its focus was affecting the turnout of the election. So let's talk about that. And while we're at it, we can touch on aspects of the IG report and hearings that we find relevant and interesting. And so let's start there.
Okay. Well, here's what I was getting at. Number one, I've been reading books lately about the CIA program, and doing some stuff about some past CIA programs and studying the CIA and talking to a good friend of mine, John Kiriakou, who was a CIA whistleblower, Ray McGovern, et cetera. Again, CIA whistleblower. And what you start to discover is this, that there is, as an American, I guess all countries have this, as an American, you just believe we're the good guys. We get convinced that we're going around the world and that we've got, everyone's best interest in hand and we're doing good things. When you start studying the history of the CIA, and when I say the CIA, let's not pretend that the CIA is some extra governmental agency, and that's a mistake we made, as though, well, this is the CIA, not the government, as though they're in no way related to the government, right? This is the United States. When people around the world see CIA operations, they see United States operations. They don't see some agency that's separate from us and from our government, right? But
they'll still say that's the Americans,
Right. But so what happens is you start to see how amoral that our intelligence community has been over the course of the years. And the Phoenix program during the Vietnam War, they were involved in kidnapping, murder, rape, and lying to particularly the American people. That a big part of what the CIA did was they instituted the Phoenix program. They instituted the operations that they wanted to institute in Vietnam, doing all the many things that they did. But they were very careful to ensure that the American people saw them through the lens that they wanted to be seen through as the good guys. An example is one particular group that the CIA put together that was out doing nefarious deeds in an organization that was out there doing nefarious deeds in Vietnam. But what the CIA did very carefully was ensure that the news that we saw gave the impression that this was an organic group, that this group just sprung up from Vietnamese who were like, hey, the Americans are good people and we want to fight the communists and let's all get together and save ourselves from the North Vietnamese, when they actually put that together. So they knew they had to lie to the American people. They couldn't say to the American people, we put this group of people together to wander around Vietnam and do things. They had to pretend as though this was part of the organic circumstances in Vietnam. So, but my point here being this, it helps you to understand that you are being lied to. It helps you to understand that a big part of intelligence is lying to the American people. They lie in small ways around the world to people to get what they want. Sure, everybody knows spies of all countries do this. But one big thing they do is ensure that we don't know what they're doing. That gives you insight to what's going on right now. When you understand that that's what's happened in operation after operation with the CIA for many, many years, you understand they didn't wake up yesterday and stop doing it. They didn't say like, hey, we've been lying to the American people for years, but you know what? That's the wrong thing. Let's start telling them the truth. It gives you a different perspective because then you realize that you as an individual have to do your own investigation, that you have to weed through what they're doing and figure it out for yourself. And when you see the news tell you something or the government says something, that you understand not only is it may not be true, it more than likely isn't true. So I think the big thing that you learn from studying, if I had to sum it all up, from studying the history of our intelligence operations in this country and abroad, is to understand that you have to search for yourself, find the information, come to your own conclusions, because the information that's going to be given to you is more often not just a lie, not just an outright lie to mislead you, but it's misleading you somewhere. It's a lie to direct you to believe something. It's an assertive lie. It's an assertive lie. So it's not just to mislead you. It is to A, mislead you to what they're doing, but B, to direct you to believe something that isn't true so that you'll continue to support them. And I think that's very important, particularly considering what's going on now and the gravity of the situation that we are looking at now. I think most Americans don't understand where we are right now and the gravity of the situation that we are facing with what I would call an attempted preemptive coup in America.
And the other thing is that, they specialize in color revolutions, like you were just similar to what you're just talking about, and elections and coups. Yeah. I mean, that is their sort of one of their specialties, and propaganda. Of course, there are other organizations who work on that as well.
Think about this. Think about how critical it is, what you just said, how important that is. One of the things that the CIA does, one of the things that they've said when James Woolsey was on Laura Ingram's show, a show that I've been on many times, right? Mm-hmm. And she asked him about the U.S. interfering in other elections, the CIA. He says, well, yeah, back in 1947, we did that to stop a communist government. And then he started saying, we'll do that to stop a communist government. And she said, well, are we interfering in anybody's elections right now? And he said, he laughed it all. In other words, yes. Now, think about the importance of that, though. The CIA is saying, if there is a country and we feel that the electorate in that country is going to select someone and we don't think it's in our best interest, we'll do what we need to stop it or change it, right?
Yeah.
Here's the question. Do you think they stop with other countries? It's getting obvious now that that's their plan, but it ain't just for other countries, that they are executing. This is what they do. This is what they're good at. And guess what? They're doing it here also. And I would suspect, and evidence points to this, that this ain't the first time. But because they planned on Hillary Clinton winning, no one would ever find out because she was probably, her or her cronies were in on it, that they felt we can do it here and get away with it because the person that we want to win will win. It just so happened that that didn't go bad. But they're just doing what they've done everywhere else. And it makes sense. It's consistent with the mission of the CIA to ensure that various countries, including this one, only elects the people that they feel is in the best interest of their policies in the big picture. Right.
And there is some tidbit in one of the rabbit holes is Stefan Halper. I believe it's known now that he meddled in, was it the 1980 election?
But let's talk about that. Stefan Halper this guy's a linchpin here. It's critical. And this whole what happened in London. So Stefan Halper, whose father-in-law was a CIA officer, right? His father-in-law was a CIA.
Right. A honcho, right?
In 1980, he worked with, many people know this, George H.W. Bush, George Bush Sr., ran the CIA. He was formerly a CIA chief before he was vice president. Briefly, but he was a CIA chief. That Stefan Halper worked with, and this is important, he worked with the Reagan campaign via George H.W. Bush and the CIA. Now, keep in mind, Jimmy Carter was the president. The CIA was under Jimmy Carter. So the CIA worked with the Bush campaign, including Stefan Halper, against the incumbent president, right? To ensure that Reagan got elected and that Carter lost. This was when Carter was president, and the CIA, they worked against their boss, against the commander in chief, which is, clearly a major violation of law. So Stefan Halper was involved in interfering with an election with the CIA in 1980. Now let's fast forward to 2016. 2016, Stefan Halper. Now the question is, who was he working for? It wasn't independent, and this question isn't being asked. Stefan Halper contacts this guy Papadopoulos, who was a very low-ranking guy on the Trump campaign. He invites the guy to London. He pays for the guy to go to London. The guy gets there. He says, "Oh, give me a paper on energy." Well, if you've paid any attention to Papadopoulos, he's not the brightest bulb, by any stretch. So he writes a paper on energy efficiency or something, energy policy, which is a piece of crap. They give him $3,000 for this paper. So they bring the guy there, pay all his expenses, give him $3,000, take him to strip clubs, and who knows what may have happened there, of course. Okay, Halper does all of this. And this other guy, Joseph Mifsud, who was a professor, and if you know anything about the CIA, professors are like, that's what they use all the time for their cover. But so while he's there, he meets this other guy who purports to be, a contact to the Russians. Okay, so all this is going on, and this is allegedly where the FBI investigation supposedly started. But here's what's important. While Halpern is doing this in 2015, 2016, he's paid nearly $400,000 by the Pentagon. So he's there doing this, and he's being paid by the Pentagon. So here's the question. What services is Stephen Halpern providing to the Pentagon for this $400,000? Nobody's asking that question. He's being paid by the U.S. government. What government agency is paying him, and what services is he providing for that? So obviously, this guy is at the foundation, the very bottom. If you want to go to the bottom, if I'm an investigator and I'm investigating and I want to go to the core of this thing, I'm going to go to Stephen Halpern and I'm going to say, who were you paid by? Who was your contact who was your contact in the Pentagon, in the government, to get paid by? I want to talk to that person. What were you being paid for? What services were you provided? What information were you passing to whom? I want to know who your contact is. I want to know how much you were paid, and I want to know what services you provided, right? If I'm Robert Muller, well, you can't find any of that out. You know why? Because Stefan Halper has disappeared. He's off the grid. He can't be found. We're to believe that a man who is a CIA operative can't be found by the CIA. We're supposed to really believe that the CIA loses track of their operatives, a guy who was at the foundation of the Russiagate scandal, and the CIA doesn't know where he is? Oh, let's go one further. The alleged professor, Joseph Mifsud, the professor who was supposedly had offered Papadopoulos inroads to the Kremlin, disappeared, gone. You can ask him questions. Nobody knows where he is. And when people start researching him, they find out that his connections aren't to the Russians. His connections are to the UK intelligence, to MI6. Now, let's go one further. Christopher Steele. Christopher Steele wrote the infamous Steele dossier about, allegedly about Trump that's been mostly shown to be garbage and lies and absolute madness, right? So Christopher Steele's also in the middle of this, right? Well, this is a guy that needs to be questioned, but you can't question him because he's disappeared also. So we're to believe that the three people at the very foundation of the Russiagate scandal have all gone off the radar and disappeared, and we're to believe that the CIA and MI6 can't find them. Oh, I think they can find them. Because they're hiding them in a safe house. So my point is, with that, it is obvious, it is blatantly obvious that these three people were involved in an intelligence operation that that MI6, the UK intelligence, and the CIA were behind. And we know at the time that John Brennan had a meeting with the head of MI6. We know that John Brennan allegedly, so as we understand, met with Comey, who was the head of the FBI, and encouraged him to open an investigation. So we're to believe that the head of the CIA encouraged the FBI chief to open an investigation, but he wasn't involved in anything himself. He was sitting on the sidelines. This is an absolute mess. So what we're seeing now, and we can get to the IG report next, but I'll bridge this into the IG report, is
sure, that
the CIA, MI6, were involved in an intelligence operation against the Trump campaign, that they were attempting to, it appears to some extent, I would say there was some level of entrapment there, because they're saying to a low-ranking member, hey, we got this guy who can connect you to the Kremlin, but even the guy that was supposedly connecting to the Kremlin was one of their people. So they knew there was no connection to the Kremlin, because the alleged connection to the Kremlin was one of their agents, Mifsud. So they had set this up, and they claim that Papadopoulos had a Kremlin connection, and therefore they had to open an investigation because he had a Kremlin connection, but the Kremlin connection was their guy. So we know that. Crazy. So now at this point, the CIA is involved in a clandestine operation against the Trump campaign. Meanwhile,
Brennan admits that he started a multi-agency task force, right? He admits that they were working on this during the investigation.
So look what we have here now, a multi-agency task force. We have the CIA and the FBI, at least the CIA and the FBI, working together to take down the Trump campaign. This is a major issue here right now. I would argue it's so big, I would make this argument. In the event that the American people really found out what happened, in the event that the world would find out what was going on here, it would be so big, it would be so astonishing that it would threaten the system. It would threaten our system of government, because what people would find out was that there was an attempted preemptive coup by our intelligence communities, and that includes the CIA and the FBI. Can you imagine what would happen in our government if that was found out?
I think it would be like another church commission, I think.
It would be way bigger than this. It would be way bigger, because the church commission was looking into what they were doing. This would be, at the time we're saying someone else is interfering with our government. This isn't realistically, there was an attempted preemptive coup.
Well, here's the thing that confuses me. Everybody believed that that Clinton was going to win.
Right.
So I'm confused by during the period of time. I mean, I think they right up, of course, to election night, everyone thought Hillary Clinton would win, and that there was just only a tiny chance of Trump winning. And we know from the Strzok text, the Peter Strzok text, that he felt there was still a small chance, and he needed an insurance policy, which people are assuming is the Trump-Russia investigation. But I wonder if it was an attempt to, a preemptive coup, like you're saying, or in the beginning, like, how did this thing start out? I'm now tending toward thinking that in the beginning, it was a protective measure because Hillary Clinton has so much baggage. And they knew there were things out there. There were people talking about they're going to leak things, things that are really, really damaging. I thought that they maybe used the intelligence apparatus to intercept those things, to prevent it from happening, or at the very least, to give them a heads up so that they, could do damage control and they would be ready for it. And then, I think it converted to a coup type thing after the election. But of course, it's all, speculation.
Right, certainly. Well, here's what I think. A couple of things. And remember, you're talking to a person who continually predicted that Hillary would lose. I continually, on the radio, on television, I continually said Hillary Clinton's unelectable. Donald Trump will win. So I feel like this. There were those who, I'll put it like this. The system, the establishment continually put forward the message was Hillary's going to win with ease in a landslide, right? That's what they told us all the time. They're trying to make a self-fulfilling prophecy. She's going to win. She's going to win. But let's not forget one of the texts. Lisa Page said to Strzok, Trump's not going to be president, right? Right? Now, what does that tell you? That tells you that they knew that there was a chance that they knew it was not a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, they didn't act like people who knew that she was going to win.
Everybody knew that Hillary was a horrible candidate, and that the tea leaves were on the wall. The writing was on the wall, and people were looking at it saying, "Oh, Hillary's going to win. She's going to win, right? I believe she's going to win. Do you believe she's going to win? Right? That tells you something." Lisa Page at that point was scared to death. Oh my God! What she was really saying is, "I'm afraid that Hillary's going to lose to Trump." She said, she's going to win, right? And then Strzok said, no. Trump's going to lose, right? He won't be president. And he said, no, we'll make sure that which the question becomes, he didn't say I'll do it. He said we, which clearly shows he was referring to himself and some group of others that were going to make sure that Trump doesn't win. Now, if they truly believed that Trump had no chance, they wouldn't have any reason to do anything, would they? They would have no reason to put their foot on the scale. I think they knew Hillary was a bad candidate. And their thing was, look, here's what we're going to do. We think she's going to win, but we ain't taking no chances. The old saying, kill a gnat with a sledgehammer. I had a football coach that said that one time, kill a gnat with a sledgehammer. And that being, don't take any chances. If you're up by 3 touchdowns, try to go up by 10 touchdowns. Try to, lead the other team by so many points that they can't possibly catch up. You know what I mean? Win by as much as you can. Yeah. And they looked at it and they're like, if there's any possibility that Trump can win, we got to make sure that doesn't happen. We're going to do everything in our power to ensure that Trump doesn't win. And then if he does win, we'll have him where we want him. But we're going to do everything we can to make sure that Trump does not win. And I think that's what that was all about. It was like, we ain't taking no chances. Everything we have has to go into ensuring that Hillary Clinton wins and Trump doesn't.
And they overdid everything, the Clinton campaign. They overspent. The media was crazy. There'd be like 17 Trump headlines in one newspaper in one day, or at one glance, and they had all these different plans and were micromanaging. So it doesn't surprise me that they would overdo it, and they were overcautious. Plus they knew that she had baggage. There were potentially devastating things that could come out, and apparently, that's the way they acted.
Well, and now let's get into the IG report a little bit, because that's important. Based on the IG report, they knew that she was guilty of crimes. If you do that investigation, you know she's guilty of crimes. You know two things. Number one, that the particular crimes that she's accused of, don't require intent. You know what I mean? It's like, as an example, it's like in Maryland. I live in Maryland. You have to wear your safety belt, your seatbelt when you're driving, or you can get a ticket. It doesn't require intent. Because you can say, I forgot to put it on. It doesn't require intent. You don't have to not mean to put it on. If you don't have the safety belt on, that's a violation. You can get a ticket. If you allow the classified material to go in an area where it's not supposed to be, such as a private server, etc., that in itself is a violation. It doesn't matter whether you intended to do it or not. So what she was doing didn't require intent. They knew that. But even if it had required intent, that her people erased emails and used a program called BleachBit to make sure that that they were unrecoverable. So even if intent was required, intent was easy to prove. So they looked at that and they knew there's so many problems here. We got to deal with this. Now, when you look at the IG report, it's pretty damning. And you see something else. The other thing you see is the extent that they're going to cover it up. Here's one thing that's obvious. The IG is doing the Inspector General, this guy Horowitz, he's dealt a bad hand, because it's obvious his job is to cover this up. But it's so blatantly obvious at the end of his investigation that all he can say is, well, there was a biased state of mind. It's, basically it's clear these people were biased. However, he says, I don't have any documentative, or the other thing he says, or testimonial evidence of bias. In other words, nobody wrote down, hey, I'm letting Hillary go because I like her. Or nobody got in front of a microphone and testified, hey, why'd you let Hillary go? Hey, because I like her and I hate Trump. So the only thing he didn't have was basically a videotaped confession. The idea that I don't have documentative or testimonial evidence of bias. Well, okay, so you don't have a videotape for confession. How many investigations do you actually get a videotape confession? What he had was people saying, I hate Trump. He's loathsome. You have a person who's leading the investigation against Hillary Clinton, in this guy Strzok, leading the investigation, saying Hillary Clinton should win 100 million to 1. And you're going to say that's not a biased investigation? It's absurd. It is a joke. The thing about it is this. No, I'll say this. I'll agree with him, and I'll say, no, there was not a biased investigation against Hillary Clinton. There was no investigation against Hillary Clinton. There was nothing but a cover-up. There was nothing but a group of people intent on covering up criminal activity by Hillary Clinton. There was no investigation. So he's right. There was no cover up. There was nothing done wrong in the investigation, because no investigation ever existed.
Why did they do that investigation to begin with, if they were just going to make it a show? I mean, I would actually argue that it looks to me like all three of those, the Clinton email investigation, the Russia investigation, and the Muller, they all seem to be for the public, for
public consumption. I agree.
Not really. I heard you mention in one of your shows that you didn't think, because of all this stuff going on, you didn't think any charges that came out of these could hold up in court. It would be, because they're just.
Let me give you an example. There were recently, and you've probably seen this happen. I remember that it happened in LA before, and this happens. Recently in Baltimore, there was a crew of police officers on some special unit, like 5 or 6 of them. And it was found that they were planting guns on people and stealing drugs. You see that every now and then. That comes out where there's like a bad group of officers doing all kinds of horrible deeds, right? And what happens when that happens? The state's attorney or district attorney, depending on whatever it is, attorney general, they have to go back and look at every case that these officers were involved in and let everybody go, because it's determined that they're crooked. And if they had their hand in any case, any kind of way, you have to say, we can't. These guys were found to be planting evidence, lying and stealing drugs. Any case they were involved with, you can't take it for granted that what they're saying is true. In fact, you have to assume that everything they were saying is lying, right? Because their credibility is gone and every case they're involved in with is gone. Likewise, when you look at an investigation and you find that the lead investigator was totally corrupt and totally biased, right? Can you see anything from that investigation that would be admissible in court? If you look at Strzok was involved in the Muller investigation at a very high level, right? And then at some point they threw Strzok. Muller tossed him out of the investigation, right? And tossed him aside. They didn't even tell us until months later that Strzok was involved in the investigation. Now, I'm an attorney and I'm defending Trump for whatever comes out of that investigation. You know who I'm putting on the stand over and over again? Strzok. I'm keeping him on the stand. Forget everybody else. This guy's on the stand. You know who else is on the stand? Page. Now, two other FBI officials who were named like personnel, person one and person two, whose names have now been released. Actually, I think.
They have?
Yes. Someone in the Senate Intel or House Intel released two of the names of the CIA, FBI officials who were named. So here's the bottom line. I'm defending Trump. That's who stays on the stand. Now, you're on the jury. Are you ever going to find anybody guilty? There's an investigation, and I've got people constantly from the FBI saying, well, didn't you say you were going to stop this guy? Yeah. Didn't you call them names? Let me read that. Didn't you say you had an insurance policy? What do you mean by an insurance policy? What do you mean by we'll stop him? When I get finished with that, first of all, no prosecutor in their right mind is going to take that case to court. As the investigator, when you come to the prosecutor and say, hey, here's my case against Trump, will you prosecute? They're going to say, my God, your investigation's a mess. Your people obviously were conspiring against the target of the investigation. Forget it. So my point is, the Mueller investigation is dead, dead, dead. They might as well close the door, lock the door, and everybody go home, because I don't believe you can charge anyone, Donald Trump or anyone else. In fact, I think Mike Flynn and Papadopoulos should go back and they should withdraw their guilty pleas and fight this thing and ask for and start asking for all the background information on what happened with them. I think these people need to expose this investigation. I think they're going to have big, big problems because they charge this Russian internet research agency, this Russian, online clickbait company. Mueller charged them with a bunch of things and assumed that they wouldn't defend themselves. Right. They hired lawyers, and now the lawyers are coming to Mueller saying, "Okay, fine, we are going to defend ourselves, and here's what we want. We're going to send you the interrogatories, and now we want you to provide discovery. We want information." And Mueller's people, you know what they're saying in court? We need more time.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. You charged me. You don't get more time. You can't charge me if you're not ready. And when I say, okay, I'm filing for discovery, I want information, say to the judge, I'm not ready. Well, you shouldn't file the charges. Exactly. Judge, if you weren't ready, you better get ready because you filed the charge. So they're in a world of trouble. I think ultimately those charges get thrown out. And if they don't get thrown out, then their attorneys are going to get the opportunity to any information that Mueller has that they can use to defend themselves. So ultimately, I think this thing falls apart. They might as well close the doors now. They have no investigation. It's exposed for what it is.
So the other investigation, the Trump-Russia investigation, Peter Strzok led that one as well. Now, that was a counterintelligence investigation. So that was never going to go to court.
Right.
But the fruits of that, I think, were used to, the
Steele dossier.
Special counsel. Yeah, I mean, I think it still taints or could taint the Mueller investigation. But here's the other thing. Christopher Wray mentioned, I did watch most of that hearing, and he keeps bringing up the credibility of the FBI itself.
Right.
And of course, Horowitz also brings up that it casts a cloud over the FBI's handling of the investigation and the investigation's credibility. But Wray was clearly had an even bigger picture. He's like, you can't taint the FBI because in a courtroom, the FBI agents who's testifying, his word has to be like gospel. Otherwise, sort of our whole our federal law enforcement apparatus is at threat. Now, you're saying that this investigation, this one agent, Peter Strzok, because of his known behavior now, it just ruins the credibility of the whole investigation. But is there a broader issue? Oh, and they have to go back and look into everything else that every other case he was involved in.
Yeah, you're right. It destroys this case to me. In my opinion, it destroys this case, and you have to look at his past. But you know that all of that aside, right now it destroys all of this. But that's just garbage rhetoric. That really. So you're going to tell us that clearly Peter Strzok has no credibility as an unbiased investigator. That's gone. That ship's done sailed. It's obvious that he was a very biased investigator. So now Christopher Wray is going to say, well, if the court doesn't believe the FBI officers, then our entire system falls. Well, here's one thing we know: they can't believe that FBI officer.
Right.
We can't believe Page. We know that McCabe is in deep trouble. We know that Comey, according to the Inspector General, was insubordinate and incompetent. So here's the bottom line. Should a court of law say, well, look, obviously the chief, Comey, was incompetent and unreliable. Obviously you had people like McCabe who were at minimum incompetent and unreliable, if not corrupt. Apparently, obviously you had biased people running these investigations, but we're going to believe them because we wouldn't upset the system. That's almost what he's arguing. It's an absurd argument. It's like saying, okay, yes, it's obviously that Garland's a serial killer. But if we don't view Garland as a nice family man, well, then the whole system will fall apart. Granted, he truly is a serial killer, but we have to, for the sake of the whole system, we have to ignore that and pretend he's a family man.
I think that is where I do think that that's what's happening here. They're saying that the FBI must be preserved. And the fact that there was clearly, I would call it meddling in a presidential election by our own law enforcement and intelligence. And we have to just pretend that didn't happen because we must preserve the FBI.
If we think about what we're looking at here, this is corruption on a grand scale. This is, to be honest, this is what we do to other countries. Our intelligence community is doing to us very specifically what we do to other countries. And I will say this, if it were investigated far enough, then it would overwhelm the system because we're looking at Watergate. In my opinion, Watergate is like jaywalking inside this. You know what I mean? Watergate is like someone who took their dog out with no leash in a city that has leash laws in comparison to this. Watergate was about, ostensibly, there's questions about that too, but ostensibly it was about, one party spying on another party to gain an advantage in an election, right? But when you look at this is not about Nixon being bad or people breaking in or a few bad guys here. Let's not forget that there were people involved in Watergate who were CIA also. But if we take the premise of Watergate as everyone believes it to be, right? It was about, breaking into the Democratic headquarters, stealing their information, spying on another party, and then lying about it, right? What we're talking about here is not one party or the other, one person or the other. We're talking about the entire system. We're talking about the media, right? Who was all in bed with Hillary Clinton's people, right? From top to bottom.
Yeah.
We're talking about the CIA that was involved in an operation that was so crooked that they got to hide the people now. It was so crooked that they have to hide the people. Halper, Miss Food, Chris Steele, gone, done, disappeared. I guess they're on another planet.
I think Steele's back now, but he disappeared.
Right. And you don't hear Adam Schiff and company saying, well, we've got to talk to, Halpern, Steele, and Miss Food. You don't hear that. Where's Halper? You don't hear them bringing him in. Here's the thing, and it's very telling. Why aren't they bringing this guy in? This guy is at the foundation of Russiagate. Why is it that the Senate and the House never asked for this guy? They're pretending he doesn't exist. Let me add this. If I've been an investigator, if I'm Robert Mueller and I look at this, I want to know what's going on, right? So there's two things I have to do. It's a must, and it's obvious. And I'm a lowly little guy here in comparison to the brilliant Mueller, the unimpeachable paragon of virtue, as we've been told by the mainstream media. But here's what I got to do first. The allegation is but one of the first allegations is that the DNC computer was hacked and that Julian Assange worked with Russiagate, right? Worked with the Russians. So here's the first thing I got to do. I know where Julian Assange is. I know he's in the Ecuadorian embassy, right? I need information. I'm going to go or I'm going to send my investigators to London. I'm going to call Julian Assange and I'm going to say, look, you're in the Ecuadorian embassy. What you're doing, that doesn't have anything to do with me. I'm doing an investigation. I would like to send an investigator to talk to you, to ask you questions about that. Are you willing to do that?
He's already offered to.
Huh?
He's already offered.
Think about this. He's offered to talk and they won't listen to him. No, we won't listen to this guy. Think about it. This is an investigation and you want to get to the bottom. And a guy at the center of the investigation calls and says, hey, man, I'm ready to talk. No, we ain't talking to you. Apparently, they don't want to know what he has to say. So Mueller has no
curiosity
to talk to one of the most important voices here. Number one. Number two, this guy Halpern. I got to talk to him. In fact, if I'm him, I go to the CIA and I say, CIA, yeah, this man has gone off the radar. Find this man. Bring him to me. I got to talk to him. This is an issue of national security. You bring me Stefan Halper. I need to talk to him. And I'm going to the Pentagon and I'm finding out who paid Stefan Halper? How much did they pay him? And what services did he provide? And whether the chain, let me chase that money back. Because that money, the State Department and the CIA are, six in one, half dozen the other. If it came from the Pentagon or the State Department, it came from the CIA. So if you think about it, the foundation of Russiagate, Stefan Halper, Chris Steele, Joseph Misfood, they don't want to talk to him. They want to talk to Randy Credico or somebody or, a comedian. They want to talk to anybody. But
Roger Stone or something.
So even that, Russiagate, the investigation by Mueller is a lie and it is a cover-up.
Well, the way they treat Robert Mueller is like a god, as you said, an unimpeachable. I found him to be a very curious choice to be the special counsel because right off the bat, he's got a lot of conflict of interest. Comey worked for him closely. Why would you choose Mueller? And isn't it true that Trump had just interviewed him like a day or two before he was appointed?
Here's what we know. We know Mueller and Comey worked together and they were buddies. So Mueller is and Comey writes this book about how bad, it's obvious. One thing is obvious. That Strzok despised Trump, that Lisa Page despised Trump, right? And it's pretty clear at Comey's book that he despised Trump, right? Yeah. So what we know is the people who are leading the investigations against Hillary Clinton and against Trump all despised Trump. And
also Clapper and Brennan.
Right. They despise. So we're to believe that Mueller was the one unbiased guy who was best friends with these guys? So we know this is a bunch of people that despise Trump. I suspect, though, they're looking for a way out now. I suspect because the problem is too much information is getting out. And they know that if the American people find out that there was an attempted preemptive coup, it's going to blow our government apart. It's going to blow our government to pieces. It's going to blow our intelligence. The American people would demand that the CIA and the FBI are ripped into 50 pieces and thrown to the wind and completely rebuilt from anew if the American people find out about this massive operation within our intelligence community to stop Donald Trump. And I ain't even a Trump fan. But what I know is, by any stretch of the imagination, I'm a left-leaning person. I'm not a Trump supporter, but I'm a supporter of justice, and I understand that we do not – look, we're fooling ourselves. We don't have a democracy. This is not a democracy. This ain't happening in a democracy.
Plus, if it happens, it's a precedent then. And
right.
There's going to be at the very least, there's going to be revenge. Trump's going to say, well, you did that to me.
Right. So
now I've got the reins. So I'm going to do it to you. It's just this is what always worried me about the surveillance apparatus. It's so much power. It's irresistible, and it will be used to abuse power, and it'll eventually get to the elections. This is exactly, be used to manipulate elections. no, never mind 100 other things too. But that's the thing that, I mean, it was just obvious to me where it would lead. I just want to mention one thing too. You know, the Horowitz report, it's got some very damning material in it. But, you know, we still don't have most, even just the Strzok page tech, the FBI texts.
Right.
We still only have part of them. Right. And Horowitz made clear during that hearing that those texts were on FBI devices. They were on FBI devices. He did not get the personal emails or personal phones or burners or whatever they have. So there's all that. Plus, I mean, we haven't seen anything from Comey and McCabe, and as far as I know, but there are big date ranges that are missing from the FBI texts. First of all, they gave one batch and they refused. I think they said, "Oh, we can't find the rest," and then magically the rest were found. And another thing, well, let me just tell you about the date gaps. So the things that they still don't have are the middle of December 15th, 2016 to May 17th of 2017, that's really when everything started blowing apart, right? And then they also don't have some in July of 2017. But that period right after the election was explosive, in my memory anyway.
Think about this. We're talking about people who are allegedly investigating Hillary Clinton because like 33,000 emails disappeared and they were looking for her emails and looking for her interagency communications, et cetera, right? And when you start looking to the FBI, they do the same thing. When you start looking into them, it's like, where's your emails? Oh, well, we've lost, can't find them. Were they really going to find her guilty of something or say anything about it? Because as soon as they get pressed, they're doing the same thing. And we're supposed to believe that they just disappeared, that the FBI can't find them. There are a number of things that they won't release. So we know it's bad. I think there are a couple of things. I think this thing's over. I think they got to really walk away at some point. They got to try to, I'll put it like this. I think now that Mueller and his crew are looking for a way out because, first of all, if they come after Trump, if they decide to come after Trump and Trump says, and they'll have the same problem that they're having with the Internet Research Agency from St. Petersburg, Russia. And that is, if they come after Trump, then he gets to file for discovery and his lawyers are going to say, give me everything. And they are in the world of trouble. And this nefarious plot could be exposed and then they all go down.
Well, I think this was supposed to play out like Watergate, where they force him to resign.
It was more about making sure he doesn't get elected. And then once he got elected, there's a lot of damage control and seeing if they could find a way to get him out of office. You're right. And to find things to force him to resign and make him look bad and just get him out without having to get their hands dirty. Just scare him a little bit, get him to resign, and then they're happy.
And just cripple his presidency so that he would have to do what the deep state wants, basically.
Yeah.
Why do you think we have John Brennan, right? And we know that John Brennan raised the suspicions about Russia.
Right.
And John Brennan had this interagency task force. And we know that he's got access to intel galore.
Yep.
Maybe they have to do a little jumping through hoops to get American stuff. But personally, I don't believe that. I think that's only evidence that might be used in a court. I think they have access. Well, I mean, Edward Snowden has said he could.
Think about that too. Interagency task force. You've got the FBI, you've got the CIA, you've got NSA, which can snoop on anything, right? So Trump and all of his people, they can read every email they've sent, whether on private servers, whether it's from their phone, whatever, they can read everything. Every call they make, the NSA can snoop on everything, right? So they had the ability to read every text message Trump and all of his people said, to read every email, to listen to every voice message, to listen to every call. There is nothing that anybody even remotely related to Donald Trump could do that they could not intercept, right? So if in fact there was some Russian interference collusion, right? They would know it the second it happened. They would know it instantly because they were intercepting everything that Trump people did. The truth of the matter is this: they don't need an investigation to know whether there was collusion, because they were listening to and reading everything that came from everybody in the Trump team. In fact, I would argue that they already knew there was no collusion. They already knew it because they read every email, every text, they listened to everything, and they would have known it in real time when it happened. There was no way around that.
That's in one of the Peter Strzok texts where he's deciding whether or not to sign on to the Muller investigation. Mm-hmm. And he says he's hesitant because he says, I don't think there's any there. And, everyone thinks that he's saying that there's nothing to the, Russia collusion thing. I mean, we can't be sure. We don't have all the text around it, but it sure looks that way. Right. And I find it interesting that Horowitz, decided to publish that.
It's interesting. And again, that supports my theory, because here's a guy who's in the middle of the investigation, and that they are tapping phones, they're reading emails and all that. And when they start talking about Russiagate, he says, ain't nothing there, basically. I don't think there's anything there. He would know, wouldn't he? You know what I mean? He's in the midst of all this investigation. He would know. And he's like, I don't think there's anything there. Because he doesn't not think there's anything there. He knows that there was nothing there. They all know. Mueller, they all know that there's nothing there. That's why what Mueller's doing is a combination. Basically, he's looking for financial crimes on certain people, number one. And number two, it's a big CYA cover-up, and it's put pressure on Trump so we can help to control him, so he'll do what we want regarding foreign policy, because that was the big fear that they had, that his foreign policy would go outside of something, that they wanted to happen.
Might get a little too much peace.
He's friendly with Russia, which he said he was going to be. He's going to end all of these wars in the Middle East and bring people home. That's what he said he was going to do. They weren't having that. And they needed leverage on him. And this investigation gave them constant leverage. They know there's nothing there. It's a joke. Now, and I think the other thing is, if you look at this, to me, here's one of the signs of their desperation. You and I, we've been on this earth a long time. And we know that there are clandestinely CIA operatives in the media. We know that. And NSA, CIA, FBI operatives in the media. But if they lose it, usually they hide it. They pay the people under the table. They slide them some information. The person writes it, pretends to be a story. We all know that happens. That's one of the reasons people like you and I are always skeptical of the media. We remember Operation Mockingbird, and we know they do that, right? Okay, that's one thing. But think something is dramatically different this time. CNN is loaded with CIA operatives, top to bottom. Philip Mudd, they've hired them. I think the fact that that NBC has hired a former, if you look at them, both NBC and CIA and CNN both have at least one former CIA chief.
Right.
And CNN has a former NSA chief. And both of them are loaded top to bottom with CIA operatives. I think that's a sign of desperation. I think they recognize, man, if this gets out, we got big problems.
You know what else, Garland? They
beat around the bush. We got to put our people in the media. We can't trust that operatives that work for us, that we'll give them the information and they'll say what we want them to say. We got to get our people there in front of the microphones, and we got to protect ourselves and cover this thing up. I think the fact that there's so many CIA operatives in the media is clear evidence that they are scared, they are in desperation, and they're doing everything they can to make sure that they cover their tracks.
And don't forget the Democratic primary, where there were, I don't know the exact number, but something like 40 candidates in the primary were intelligence or military intelligence. I mean, what's going on with that?
Here's the same thing. You stack the media with former intelligence operatives. You stack the Congress with intelligence operatives. You know what I mean? It's like, if you watch The Matrix, and in The Matrix, they had those guys that were agents, and then they started turning everybody into agents, and so, everybody around was agents. It's the board. So now it's basically the CIA saying, oh my gosh, well, we got to control the media. Let's put all of our people in the media. What about Congress? They're a problem. We got to control Congress. Let's get our people in. Before you know it, we're going to have a country that's run by CIA agents, a Congress, the media, everywhere you turn on, all you'll see is the CIA. Because hate to tell you, we're kind of there now.
It feels like it sometimes.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, I've kept you about an hour. So if you want to wrap up, if you want to continue this conversation another time, do a part 2, I'll leave it up to you.
Be happy to do a part 2.
Okay, good.
I'm sure something else will come up and we'll have plenty to talk about.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about it again because, I mean, it's hard to find anybody who's honest about it.
Right.
You know?
Well, there's the problem, and that is because people, in our country, we've been taught to, I guess everywhere, we've been taught to trust the system.
Yeah.
That, and it's part of this. America's wonderful. America's great. We don't do anything wrong. We're the heroes of the world. Therefore, we got to trust our government because they're the good guys. They wouldn't lie to us. They wouldn't do anything bad. And so this thing permeates instead of allowing people, look, to me, the person that loves their country the most is the person that questions the country. The person that says, hey, I want to make sure we're doing things right. I want to, if we're doing something we shouldn't do, I'm going to be the one to raise my hand and say, hey, that's not right. We shouldn't do it. So now it's almost like, well, the person, even when we don't have a democracy, when our democracy is threatened from within, you're unpatriotic if you question that.
Yeah, and it's now at like, I'm not a perfectionist. I realize that there's always going to be some corruption and things, but I think we're now at such a level of corruption, and that's why they were so blatant about it now. Yeah. You're saying it's so obvious now, they're like hardly trying to hide it. I think that shows that we're just at such a level of corruption. I also think that, everywhere you touch, like you have Comey investigating Clinton for using private emails to conduct business. And then we find out, oh, look, he used private emails too.
Right.
Like, I don't even know if anyone in the system, is there anybody who's clean? I mean, I'm sure there are, but
you know what? Here's the thing about it. We know that the system's dirty and corrupt. Very, very dirty and corrupt. And we know that it's probably considerably worse than we ever thought, that the system felt threatened and backed into a corner with Trump. Here's a guy coming in saying, let's make friends with Russia. Let's bring the troops home from the Middle East. And the system was like, whoa, we can't let that happen. And when they felt backed into a corner, they pulled out all the stops from top to bottom. And now, I'll say this, last but not least, I believe that Congress, that even the White House, that the levers of power in Washington, D.C., who, look, if you and I can figure it out, they can figure it out, right? But I believe that they will all work together, even those who were victims of this. But they're still part of the system, of this establishment system. I believe they will all work together to do their best to cover it up because it's such a huge scandal that if the people were to find out, the government would almost fall. Our government would almost fall if people were to find out the magnitude of this attempted preemptive coup. And so even though, say, Trump's the victim of this, he's still a very, very rich man, and he's still part of the system, and he makes a lot of money off this system. And all of the people will be like, okay, look, this is bad, and they went after me, you, and you. But first, we got to protect the system. We can't let the system fall. And they'll protect the system because they're making a mint. All of them are getting rich off of it.
Yeah, they just can't. I mean, it is a scary thing, but it just, what did they call it when it happened to the banks? Moral. Anyway, basically it means if you don't address these things, it's going to happen again.
Well, going into 2020, what do we have? People have to think. I mean, think about people in the Democratic Party going into 2020. They have to think, if Bernie Sanders is going to run, well, we already know they're going to kneecap him. That's a given. We already know they're throwing names out here, Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, blah, blah, blah. We already know that what they're doing is they're saying, okay, we're going to pick somebody, and we're not going to have a real primary. So we're just going to throw some names out. So you say, okay, we'll take Kamala Harris. Okay, that's the one we're going to rig the system for her. They're saying to people, we're going to throw some names out. Well, the system is going to be rigged, but we want you to be happy with the one that we're rigging the system for.
We need somebody who's going to keep that all under wraps.
Right. And who could possibly, and what kind of an idiot, I hate to sound like this, but I'll be honest. What kind of an idiot could possibly have any confidence at all going into 2020 that we're going to have a legitimate election? on both sides, knowing what we know now about what has happened.
Yeah.
If I'm running right now, if I say I'm going to run as an independent, Democrat, libertarian, or whatever, right? As soon as I start running, I'm going to be like, oh, crap. Everything I got is bugged. Everybody calls, hey, Garland, we want to talk to you about some information. Is that a CIA agent? Is that an FBI agent? What do I need to know? Now, anybody who runs, if you're outside of the system, if you're an independent, libertarian, third party, green party, whatever, right? And you run, you know that the system is putting its foot down on your neck. And you know that you are being completely investigated, you're being bugged at all times. What kind of a country do we have now when if somebody wants to run third party, they know, they're like, oh, forget it. And if they don't know that, they're a fool. They are naive if they don't recognize now that anybody who runs against this system, the CIA, FBI, etc., NSA is all over them. Well, how do you, what do we have now? Is it an open, do we have open? No, we don't. We don't have open fair elections anymore. That dog's done. You know, that dog don't hunt anymore, as they say. That's not left to barn.
Peak corruption.
Yes.
All right. So we'll continue this conversation another time, and I'd love to do that.
All right.
But for now, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was great to meet you.
Thank you. Just let me know when the show's up.
Oh, wait. Where can people find your work?
I'm at Garland Nixon on Twitter. I am Garland.Nixon on Instagram. I am plain old Garland Nixon on Facebook. Of course, just look me up I do have my own channel on YouTube. And of course, I'm at Fault Lines. That's my show on Sputnik Radio every Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. You can find us at Twitter, Fault Lines Radio, or there's any number of ways. Just search that. And then every Friday, 89.3 FM from 6 to 7 p.m. That's WPFW Pacifica in Washington, D.C.
Excellent. And we'll link all those in the show notes, too.
No, thank you very much.
All right. Take care, Garland. Talk to you soon.
Thank you very much. Let me know when it's out now, and I will share.
I will. Okay, great.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And that's our show. Thank you for listening. A special thank you for Garland Nixon. You can find Garland on Twitter at Garland Nixon. Listen to his daily morning radio show, Fault Lines, Monday through Friday, and his weekly Friday evening radio show, News Views with Garland Nixon. We're independent media. We rely on your contributions. This podcast was brought to you with the help of our generous donors. And you can pitch in by going to patreon.com/aroundtheempire or do one-time donations on our website, aroundtheempire.com. Follow us on Twitter at aroundtheempire. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and our podcast channels at iTunes and other podcast apps. On YouTube, it helps us a lot if you hit the subscribe button, subscribe to the channel, and also use the thumbs up icon to like the videos. Same goes for iTunes and podcast apps. A positive review if you like our show. I'd like that a lot. We'll see you next time. Take care.